Hello and welcome to another Brawl video. Today we're checking out this red-black artifact deck featuring Imskir Iron-Eater as our commander, an 8 mana 5/5, although it has Affinity for artifacts, so it gets a 1 mana discount for each artifact we control, so we can routinely cast it for just a black and a red, and then when it enters we draw X cards and lose X life, where X is half of the number of artifacts we control rounded down. So this can draw us quite a few cards when it enters, on average maybe 3 or 4 cards. If we cast it maybe as early as turn 3 or 4, and then it also has an activated ability for 3 and a red. We can sacrifice an artifact to deal damage equal to its mana value to any target, so that can be an excellent way to close out the game, especially when paired with some of the other Affinity for artifact cards, which we can still play for very cheap, but still have a high mana value, so that's going to translate into a lot of damage with Imskir, and this is an aggressive deck, so being able to use that ability to close out the game by burning the opponent out is also very important. So now taking a look at our deck breakdown, I've split it up into a few categories. The first one is mana acceleration. Despite having a lot of cheap cards and the Affinity for artifacts mechanic, we still want to have some other mana artifacts so we can speed up the process of deploying Imskir and quickly emptying our hand. Then we've got some other cheap artifacts, some cheap creatures that can maybe attack, especially if they have some built-in evasion. They're going to be quite useful, since we are also playing with quite a few equipment, so then having flying creatures or creatures with haste or menace can also make those equipment a lot more valuable. And then we've got the actual equipment category. Some of these can also double up as creatures, as they maybe come attached to a germ token, or are maybe the reconfigure equipment that can still attack and block naturally. And then we've got our miscellaneous section, if you will, which contains some additional card draw engines and some other cheap artifacts to enable Affinity. Then we've got actual Affinity cards that we can deploy at a discount thanks to our many artifacts. And then the final section is our removal, which includes some of the few non-artifact cards in the deck, since we don't actually have many of those, so we're playing as many artifacts as we can fit into the deck to make Imskir and other Affinity cards as powerful as they can be. So that's our deck in a nutshell. Now for the deep dive, starting with our mana acceleration. Chromox is maybe a little disingenuous here, since we cannot exile an artifact to the imprint ability, so there's not a lot of cards we can exile to it, so this taps for mana, but being a 0 mana artifact without any additional effects can sometimes be good enough just to quickly empty our hand and improve our Affinity for artifacts for Imskir, and occasionally we will be able to imprint a card to make additional mana with it. Same with Mox Amber, which only makes mana once Imskir is in play, but then it can still help us deploy the cards that we've drawn with the ability. Then Springleaf Drum is excellent with all the cheap creatures that can be tapped to make an extra mana, and this can also get around Summoning Sickness. Then we've got our 2 mana artifacts. Arcane Signet is the best one. Also have Cold Steel Heart, the Guardian Idol, Mind Stone, Solar Transformer, and the Iron Crag. And then Ornithopter of Paradise is good enough here as well, as it's also an evasive creature that we can eventually suit up with our equipment. Then I'm also playing Cursed Mirror, which can make a red mana, and can also copy a creature that's already on the battlefield when it enters, so we can maybe get a nice attack in with it. Then Thran Spider makes a Power Stone for each player, so that's 2 artifacts for Affinity. Cloud Key, naming artifact usually, will give all our artifacts a 1 mana discount, similar to a Foundry Inspector in creature form. Semblance Anvil is one of my favorite cards here, since if we exile an artifact creature to it, not only do all our artifacts get a 2 mana discount, but so do our other creatures as well, so that also includes our commander. And then a Worn Power Stone can untap, making 2 mana, and Solemn is also pretty good as a creature that finds a land when it enters and draws a card when it dies, and is also a 4 mana artifact we can sacrifice to Imskir's ability, which we actively want to do anyways. Then our cheap creatures start out at 0 mana with Ornithopter, also a great card to suit up with our equipment. Ethereum Terramander is great, as we can often adapt it for just a single black and turn into a 5/5 flyer. We've got Bomat Courier, which can get a few attacks in, and eventually, even if it attacks into opposing blockers, we can still sacrifice it to essentially replace maybe an empty hand with a lot of extra cards from exile. We've got Percussionist as another hasty creature that will replace itself when it dies. Gingerbrute can also maybe attack unopposed if there's no haste creatures on the other side if we activate it for 1 mana. Then Hope of Girapur, another flying Thopter, can also maybe sacrifice it to prevent the opponent from casting a board wipe on a key turn. Scrapheap Scrounger can keep coming back from the graveyard, even though it cannot block. Blade of the Oni, a 3-1 with Menace, can also put it in the equipment category, as we can reconfigure it, but this one we're usually just going to keep as a 3-1 Menace most of the time. Marionette Apprentice makes a servo token, and then when our creatures or artifacts die, it can drain the opponent, so one of our few non-artifacts in the deck still makes an artifact for Affinity. Volscourge is basically a 1-drop, as we'll pay 2 life to play a 1-1 flying lifelink. Patchwork Automaton keeps growing as we cast more artifact spells and has some built-in protection. Servo Schematic is also quite synergistic with Imskir, making a servo when it enters, can sacrifice it, make a replacement servo while dealing 2 damage. Smuggler's Copter we can crew quite easily, and then a 3-3 flyer that improves our hand, so what's not to like. And Steel Overseer, another payoff for having lots of artifact creatures, as it can tap to put a +1/+1 counter on each one of them. Then we get to our equipment, starting with Bonesaw, which we're not really playing because it's a powerful equipment, just because it's a 0 mana artifact for Affinity. Rabbit Battery, another hasty 1-1 that can also be reconfigured to give other creatures haste. Basilisk Collar can give our creatures Death Touch and Lifelink, so it can be a way to maybe gain back the life we lost with Imskir's ability if we're up against another aggro deck. Lava Spur Boots can give haste, 1 extra power and ward 1. Lizard Blades, a double striker that can be reconfigured to give another creature double strike. Cranial Ram, one of the best cards in the deck, giving our creatures a lot of additional power, where X is the number of artifacts we control, comes attached to a germ. And then we've got the slightly more expensive Nettle Cyst, which is quite similar, giving +1/+1 for each artifact and or enchantment we control. Then there's Sword of Fire and Ice, giving protection from blue and red. If it hits the opponent, we deal 2 to any targets and draw a card. Also very fun if we can combine it with Double Strike. Same with the Sword of Forge and Frontier, which has protection from red and green. We'll exile the top 2 cards, get to play an extra land, and then also play those cards from exile. And then Pact Weapon can be quite good, especially against decks that don't have a lot of removal for our creatures, as the equipped creature prevents us from losing the game, even if we lose a lot of life to other effects, and then can also draw us additional cards. And then the Aether Spark also makes sense as an artifact equipment planeswalker that can also give us additional mana or draw additional cards. And then we've got our miscellaneous section with more cheap artifacts. Mishra's Bauble will replace itself if we sacrifice it. Also has a bit of synergy with our fetch lanes. Tormod's Crypt can be graveyard hate, but we're usually just keeping it on the battlefield. Then there's Blood Fountain, making 2 artifacts for 1 mana. The Retrofitter Foundry has a bit of synergy with the other Thopters in the deck, and can also start generating other servo tokens. Scrap Trawler, a way to maybe get back artifacts from our graveyard if they die, also has good synergy with the Affinity for Artifacts mechanic, as we'll end up with some more expensive artifacts that we can still play on the cheap, and then those will get other creatures back from our graveyard. Then the Lodestone Golem, a way to punish non-artifact spells, and there's a very few that we're going to cast ourselves. Then there's a Mystic Forge, which can help us play artifacts off the top of our deck. And then Bolas' Citadel, the bigger version of it, where we can exchange our life total for extra cards off the top. So it can also be a very powerful effect, especially if our life total's not under any pressure. And then we get to the actual Affinity for artifact cards. The Refurbished Familiar, a 2-1 flyer, making the opponent discard a card when it enters. Frogmite is just a 2-2, but we can often cast it for free. The Demonic Junker is a recent addition, a vehicle that when it enters can destroy an opposing creature. Got Herald of Anguish, doesn't actually have Affinity for artifacts, instead has Improvise, so we can tap some number of our artifacts to help pay for it, and then a 5-5 flyer that can also make the opponent discard each turn, and maybe sacrifice artifacts to give -2/-2 until end of turn. Then there's the Frogmere Enforcer, which is the more flexible version of the Mere Enforcer, so it kind of combines Frogmite and Mere Enforcer all in one card. And then we've got the Furnace Hellkite as a 5-5 flying artifact dragon that also has fire breathing. And then we've got our removal, including Fatal Push, Lightning Bolt, and the more synergistic Galvanic Blast in this deck. Grim Bauble can give a creature -2/-2 when it enters. And then we've got a Chainsaw dealing 3 when it enters, can also be equipped later. And the Legion Extruder deals 2, can also sacrifice our weaker artifacts and upgrade them into 3/3 golems. And then Ayotia Declares War also makes an Ornithopter, good synergy with our Foundry, and can also maybe read ahead to immediately deal damage by tapping some number of artifacts, and eventually can upgrade Ornithopter into a 4/4 perhaps. And then the mana base is pretty straightforward, lots of red-black dual lands, lots of fetch lands for mana fixing, and then I'm also trying to fit in as many artifact lands as possible, especially the ones that are untapped. So Vault of Whispers is the only one we have that's on color in this deck, since the red one's not available, but we do also have Darksteel Citadel, as well as Treasure Vault as untapped artifact lands, and then I'm also playing the Bridge, which will enter tapped, but can still make both colors. And then I also like Fomori Vault as a utility land that can maybe discard a card to find additional artifacts, and then kind of the usual mana fixing. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the play, facing Valgavoth Terror Eater. So some sort of mono-black control deck, one has to guess. And they might have some ramp to get to the required 9 mana. Once Valgavoth is in play, we're gonna have a very hard time winning. That being said, this hand has potential with Automaton and some ramp artifacts. Do I play Automaton first? Could also play the Copter. They both play around 1 mana removal in a way, thanks to the ward. So I might want to start growing the Automaton a little sooner. There's nothing I actively need to discard to the Copter. Lands are good. And then next turn we can Mind Stone plus another 2-drop, as our opponents got their own Mind Stone. Okay, so Mind Stone into Copter might be the move now. Although I currently don't have another creature to crew the Copter, so maybe Cold Steel Heart's still better. Name black, so we have triple black. If we get lucky enough to draw Bolas Citadel. And then next turn I could already consider playing my commander out. Maybe after playing the Copter. Treasure Vault being an artifact land helps. In the meantime, Jad Medallion into Black Cat makes us discard at random. But I can empty out my hand. So Copter into Blade into Imskir. I guess I can attack first here. So the random discard if they chump is just a land. That works. And then refuel. Okay. So, even if they have a board wipe, which would be unfortunate, we can still get in with a Copter. Familiar can be cast on the cheap. And then we can maybe redeploy our commander soon. 4, 5, 6 mana, the One Ring will protect them. That's a good one. Let's see here. For each opponent, discard a card. So it doesn't target the opponents, so it does get around the One Ring. Ooh, Bolas' Citadel, we actually found it. And this is the perfect turn for it, since we're not attacking anyway. So, yeah, cast it. With Copter we can also maybe get rid of our top card, but a Cranial Ram I will certainly cast at the cost of 2 life. Haven't played a land yet. Oh yes. This is magnificent. Mystic Forge for life, yeah, I think we keep going. Any burn spell we need to be afraid of? I guess like a Corrupt could deal 5 to me, so we're still safe there. And then now I can crew Copter, just to get rid of my top card. Could also, I guess, activate the Mystic Forge. Probably don't need fetch lands, although they are still somewhat useful with Citadel. And then, yeah, I guess we'll activate Forge. Maybe we can cast a few more spells. Fatal Push. I don't want to take out my own creature, so might be time for Familiar. Could keep it as a way to crew Copter in case they do have a board wipe next turn. And then with the Cranial Ram, we might still be able to go the distance. So in fact, I might actually want to reconfigure the Lizard Blades so that if they do wipe the board, it's not a complete disaster. And then we also cannot forget about the Bolas' Citadel activation. So we'll see. Step 1 has to be Sweeper. Draw with a ring. And a Virtue takes out Blade. Good Fatal Push so they don't gain 2 life. It's probably worth it. I pay 1 life so you don't gain 2, and the Adventure goes away. And Davriel is acceptable. 2 damage is a little scary, I guess, but still have plenty of life to work with. And we can always equip the Collar next turn to gain more life. Vermin. So they've got a bit of a discard theme, it seems. So they are keeping up a removal spell. But we can present multiple flyers. So let's see here. So Automaton is lethal by itself. Cranial Ram hits for 12. So that plus a Bolas' Citadel activation would do it. Yeah, let's maybe start with Familiar. Can also move the blades onto Imskir to spread out our damage a little bit more. Schematic can also help crew Copter. So yeah, let's say we move the blades onto Imskir. That seems reasonable. I guess we could also activate this to just clear the Vermin. So, again, a few ways we could do this. Crew Copter. May as well play Collar and equip. Attack all out. Get rid of the Citadel. Aether Spark would have been fun too, with Automaton giving it a ton of extra loyalty. Damage happens. And our opponent's just dead here. Alright, sweet. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Arcades, the Strategist. So, a Defender deck. Can expect lots of flyers as well, so yeah, this is going to be a pretty tough matchup, all things considered. This hand is not that exciting, since we're lacking stuff to pitch to Chromox as well. This one might be a bit better. And then turn 1 I'll probably Surveil. No Mana Elf for Grimbauble to remove, so we can play a Blade of the Oni. And now Chromox. Yeah, maybe that's worth it, just to have a more explosive start. Chromox, I guess, is forced to pitch the Apprentice. And our opponent discards Tamio to the Familiar. And now Rampant Growth. Alright, so next turn could maybe play our Commander already. Play Boots. I guess we're still 1 mana short. Could play the Bauble just to get it out there. And then suit up the Boots, or maybe the Bone Saw, since Boots would be better on our Commander. Could also see the upside of suiting up the Blade, in case they play Arcades next turn to block the Familiar. Although, could also end up reconfiguring the Blade at some point. Maybe onto the Familiar itself. So we're already empty-handed. Opponent brainstorms. No shuffle effect. And they're starting to dump some defenders out there. Okay, so if I play Mirror, I'm unable to play Iron-Eater. So we'll just start here. And a Galvanic Blast isn't bad. Can still equip. Giving haste. And 4 damage, not quite enough for Arcades. So then I might take out the wall. Could also let them double block if they'd like. Nah, let's just take out the wall. And then they can jump if they like, but they don't. Opponent falls to 7. So then, if we get to 4 mana to activate, which I guess we already can, could also sack a Familiar for 4 damage. And I even have the mana to play and equip the sword, which would give protection from Arcades. So I can sneak past with the Familiar. And that could be game, since Familiar hits for 5, and then this has Menace. So this should take at least 3 more damage. Alright, that was a nice aggressive start. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Kethis. So a legendary deck. A Lodestone Golem could be good. Don't have any mana acceleration to get it out early. Our removal could be okay, since we have ways to enable Revolt. So it's a pretty reactive hand in a way. But maybe it could work. Start with a bridge. Okay, maybe Galvanic Blast the Mana Elf, keep Fatal Push for Kethis, in case we don't get to Metalcraft in time. Although with the bridge we were already up to 2 artifacts here. Vivian goes to the graveyard, and now we can play the Automaton. I'll just fetch a mountain. We don't have many non-artifacts in the deck, but we did happen to draw a few of them, so that's a bit of a number with a Golem. But we'll make it work. So this turn, Foundry plus Collar. Grow Automaton a bunch. And then we can set up a removal spell, end of turn. 2 mana to equip the Collar. If I don't have to remove anything, I can maybe fetch my Surveil land to get closer to Lodestone Golem. Alright, so Kethis, I'll just Fatal Push, I think. Although it's a close call, it's possible they've got some high toughness creatures that don't die to Galvanic Blast. But then I'll still need to Revolt the Fatal Push. So, I say we Fatal Push now and keep Blast for later. Could also go face to maybe close out the game. Alright, and we found our land for Lodestone. So that's gonna tax the opponent. And hopefully we don't face any board wipes in the near future. Imskir is also taxed, but still quite manageable thanks to Affinity. Opponent's gonna Swords the Golem. So no change in Imskir's mana. And for now, we can take some damage off Palantir. Still gonna fill the graveyard for Kethis, but Kethis still needs to show up. And no life is lost. Okay, so could maybe Power Stone, keep a Blast, and then next turn Imskir draws a little bit more. In the hopes that they maybe try and replay Kethis. Boseiju they could have maybe channeled, they decided not to, since they maybe are down to their last land in hand. And Spider Queen, we can also target with a Blast. Although not before they make some spiders. Yeah, would we rather deal with the Planeswalker or a spider? Opponent gets to chump. Queen grows. It's a close one. Could also consider going face now that our opponent is at 10. And then Imskir can maybe finish the job. Still a little risky. So maybe I should just take care of Spider Queen. Can lose some more life. And a Mox Amber's nice too. So cast it for just 2 mana. And draw 3. And then we can keep going here, thanks to Power Stone and Mox Amber now too. Could reconfigure the blades, but opponent's probably already chumping anyways. Hope of Girapur also a Thopter we can sack to the Foundry. So I guess we'll just empty out our hand. Could consider reconfiguring the blade now so it doesn't get swept up by a board wipe. I think we just play the Hope. And then I can maybe equip the Basilisk Collar so we gain 8, so we can keep losing life to the Palantir without having to worry about it. And then Foundry can sack the Hope if needed. Alright, so the game goes on. And Liliana can make us sack 2 creatures. So that's beatable. So they're just going to make a zombie. Otherwise they would be dead on board. Although they're still in rough shape here. Do I want to sack the Hope or do we prefer the Flyer? Since I could give a double strike, but that's about it. So I think a 4/4 is still better. Does Liliana trigger? Does not, only their creatures. So yeah, we'll sack the Hope. And lose some more life. Alright, that one hurt. As we draw Chromox. So Blood Fountain can also get creatures back from our graveyard. Just a Hope of Girapur at the moment. So let's see, opponent's at 10. Yeah, I can put the Lizard Blades on maybe the Construct. And then they'll chump, take 5. Can I deal 5 with Imskir somehow? Yeah, I don't have any super expensive cards. I guess the Power Stone is 3 damage. So I might just about get there. Am I better off just attacking all out? Then they chump, take 6. Yeah, I guess that's better. So we don't have to waste any mana. So then I just need to sacrifice 4 mana value worth of cards. And I guess I'm 1 mana short of activating twice. Yeah, Chromox cannot make black since Fountain's an artifact, so I can't sacrifice it here. So I think the best I can do is deal 3 right now by sacking Power Stone. So I guess we'll still have to wait a turn to close it out. But I can play Blood Fountain. Could have done that before attacking, I suppose. I could also sack the Blood token now, in the hopes of finding something that can close it out right now. Something with Affinity might do it. Just a land. I guess we'll run that out, and then pass a turn. Liliana can minus if needed. Can also activate the Foundry a bunch, but unless they can gain life, we should be alright. Now I'm just gonna let them draw with Palantir, so I don't randomly die to it. Alright, they will -4. So I might want to activate Imskir in response. Could also activate the Foundry, and then just sack a Servo here, in addition to Lizard Blades. And then I still have Imskir's ability available.
No way but my way.
Blood Fountain can also get stuff back. Old Rutstein is acceptable. Four mana left. And a Glissa. Okay, so 1 mana remains, and Imskir should be able to cross the finish line here. So our opponent can draw this time. Could start by sacking a 1-mana artifact, so we still have the Power Stone just in case for next turn. So maybe sack the Foundry, keep the Blood Fountain, opponent's at 3, and then untap, sack Power Stone for 3 more. I did not mean to lose life there, force of habit, but I guess it worked out. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Codie, a 5-color, often control deck. So this hand is not perfect, but it does have a couple decent tools. Turn 1 Scourge, turn 2 Overseer, and then Trawler can recur some of the artifacts that get destroyed. So we can start here. Is their opponent maybe on a Gates deck? That would be exciting. And yeah, we see a second Gate. So it's not just a budget mana base. Play Overseer, hit for 1. And then next turn, maybe want to start with the Inspector to discount all artifact spells. Ooh, Baldur's Gate, that's one of the Gate payoffs. Feed the Swarm takes care of Overseer. Was to be expected. And a Herald of Anguish. Yeah, I think I still Inspector over Scrap Trawler. Even though if they remove Scrap Trawler, I could get back my Overseer. So Baldur's Gate makes 3 mana. Enough for an Archdruid's Charm, which can get another Gate perhaps. And Maze's End is going to be their win condition. Okay. Chromox helps with Affinity, and we could pitch Herald of Anguish to it if we'd really like to make additional mana with it. Which could be worth it, since we can refuel with Imskir anyway. Sure. Pitch Herald. Cast Scrap Trawler, and then I can empty the rest of my hand. Demonic Junker destroys Halfling. Don't think I wanted to destroy my own thing, even though with Trawler that was a consideration. And then next turn, Imskir's looking good. And then we already have 2 7-mana artifacts we could chuck at the opponent. Ooh, expel the Interlopers. That's too bad. At least we've got the Scrap Trawler here. So we get a bunch of triggers. And we might want to stack them in a different way. I guess it doesn't really matter. Alright, so this one gets back Steel Overseer. This one can get back Scrap Trawler and Volt Scourge. But yeah, that was still a setback. So let's see, do I need an untapped land? I can go Scrap Trawler plus Overseer, so I do want an untapped land. And then we can crew to hit for 4. Alright, so next turn, Volt Scourge into Imskir. As our opponent finally deploys Codie. I guess we'll start here. Possible they're keeping up a counter spell. Still want to deploy my artifacts first so I can grow them with the Steel Overseer as well. And if they counter here, we can likely replay it next turn. That works. Opponent's gonna Void Rend and Responsible Crew. Back to the command zone, still draw our cards. And then I can activate Overseer. And smash. So it could have been worse. Opponent falls to 4. And even if they have another board wipe, we can still maybe get there with our vehicle. But let's see what Codie can find with its ability. It's gonna be random. Split up can destroy half of our board. And Codie hits a Silver Scrutiny, not the best, since they still need to pay for it. And then Scrap Trawler triggers once again. And getting back Overseer. And yeah, Fracture's not good enough. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Gonti, Canny, Acquisitor. So they're gonna try and steal our spells. That's usually what Gonti does. This hand's got potential with the Ornithopter plus Springleaf Drum. Don't have to play Ornithopter yet, since we can still tap it even if it's summoning sick. Although, could play Bobble alongside it if I'd really like. I think we can wait. Opponent might have some mana elves we can remove with it. If not, Ornithopter plus could play Cranial Ram. I guess I don't have to play the Ornithopter yet. But now there's a chance I might want to suit it up with a Ram. And I guess I can use the extra mana to equip a Bone Saw already. And we can diversify. So with a land we can play Solemn. I guess putting the Saw on the Germ makes more sense if we're planning to tap Ornithopter with a Springleaf Drum. As our opponent just plays a Signet and a Halfling, alright. So now Signet into Bobble looks good. And yeah, Cranial Ram, one of the better payoffs for this archetype. Might want to play Solemn before we deploy our commander, as our opponent tries to find a land with Planar Genesis. Anything else? A Slitherblade. Okay. So, play Solemn. And get a mountain. And then we'll just attack. Opponent might trade for the Germ. And then next turn we can count up our artifacts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So still get to draw 3. If our opponent plays Gonti, they can maybe connect with a Slitherblade, but they still need to pay mana to cast their spells, even though they get a 1 mana discount. Their opponent does take the trade after all. And I don't think we want to move the Bone Saw. Sacking Solemn to Imskir's ability is good for 4 damage as well. And Ashiok is next. Okay, so could also equip the Cranial Ram to finish off Ashiok. Might be the safer move. And then go, let's see, Overseer into Imskir. And then I can still equip, and we maximize our card draw. Can maybe still draw land as well. Alright, not the most exciting set of draws. So, still gonna equip Ornithopter. Could also go face at this point. Yeah, maybe that's better. What can Ashiok do? Bouncing the Ram doesn't help. Bouncing Imskir, we're pretty happy if they do. So we can maybe just close it out in 2 attacks, or an attack and an Imskir activation or 2. And then we can surveil end of turn to improve our draw step for next turn. Ashiok bouncing an Ornithopter might be a first. And yeah, Chromox could still be more useful than a land, since it's still an artifact for Cranial Ram and other synergies. Now Tasha, that one's pretty good against any of our 1 toughness attackers, although Overseer can maybe pump them up. And a Bitter Blossom, that one's gonna hurt him. So we've got 4 damage by sacking Solemn. So then if I can sack a 2-drop, they would die to their own Bitter Blossom here. And yeah, we might be able to just sack the Overseer. And we have just enough mana to sacrifice twice. So unless they can gain life at instant speed here, we should get there. Cold Steel Heart would have been okay, but don't really need it. So could go through the motions and attack first. Could have also suited up one of my creatures with a ram, and then just sacrifice one thing. Opponent blocks Imskir. That happens. I guess I should have activated Overseer to make it a little easier. But yeah, they were dead either way. And draw a card, deal 4 damage. And 2 more. Alright, sweet. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Tom Bombadil, so a 5-color Saga deck. Our hand has potential. Turn 1 Scourge, turn 2 can either Scrounger or declare war. And then Aether Spark's pretty good too if we can get it down. So for now, maybe setting up a turn 2 Cold Steel Heart. And then we wouldn't mind a 3rd land. Opponent's got the Signet. And we need to get Blood Crypts. So our mana should be decent. Can keep on ramping with a Power Stone next turn. Although if I draw an untapped land, I'm tempted by the Aether Spark. Opponent now with a Golden Opportunity, making a Gilded Goose. Tormod's Crypt doesn't really change anything. So Power Stone it is. Should have maybe attacked first. Small chance they take it if they are afraid of a pump spell. Did consider playing the Rapier, I think it's called, which is an equipment you can flash in at instant speed. And a Boseiju blows up Power Stone, still gives us a land in return. And I can make it the Surveil land as well. And I'll take another land off the top. And the Robbery is gonna steal my Sulphur Springs, that's mean. Drew another land anyways, so Collar plus Aether Spark seems decent. Volt Scourge doesn't hit incredibly hard. But the Aether Spark can move around and maybe suit something else up next turn. With Yotja Declares War, we can also read ahead to Chapter 2 if we need to deal damage. Could also get to Chapter 3 to maybe get the most out of our Aether Spark, so we can maybe make 10 mana. Sadly, Elspeth Conquers Death exiles our Planeswalker, so that's a setback. So with Chapter 2, our non-creature spells become more expensive, so I probably should run out Tormod Script while I can and declare war, making a Thopter. And then Scrap Heap versus Apprentice. Don't have a strong preference. I guess we'll Scrap Heap. And then with Tormod Script we could also maybe stop Chapter 3 from Conquer's Death, from returning stuff. And there's Tom. So could try and take it out next turn. Tapping 4 of our artifacts. And a Rampant Growth. Okay. So I may not want to tap the Tormod Script in case I need to sacrifice it if they send Tom to the graveyard, which currently would make sense, since it's the only card they could get back with Conquer's Death. But then they're probably not going to. But that's alright, I don't miss out on too much damage. And then I can still play Apprentice into Imskir. Opponent did send it back to the command zone. And I can still play Courier. Alright, so we're finally making some progress. I was just double checking that Conquer's Death is only the opponent's graveyard. But yeah, we don't have any creatures in ours. The Conundrum of Bowls. Seek a card with mana value less than the number of cards in your hand. Sure. Then on Chapter 2, they get to seek again, and then cast spells for free. The Living Lore. Good with sagas as well. And the Prophecy. Okay. So we'll see if we can present lethal here. Maybe not quite. Ooh, Cranial Ram. That probably makes the difference. So they do have a Gilded Goose that can jump a flyer. So what makes the most sense? I can pump the servo on the ground, and then Cranial Ram on Ornithopter, which they're then gonna jump with a Gilded Goose. Don't really care about equipping Basilisk Collar. Might want to sack Bomat Courier. Apprentice also triggers from the Germ token dying. So jump Ornithopter. This way we don't waste any additional damage. So they can jump Imskir, take 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And then sacking Bomat Courier also triggers the Apprentice. Alright, so we got to see our Imskir artifacts in action. A deck that wants to get on the board quickly, but if it does, it can present a lot of damage, especially if we find some of our key Affinity cards and other artifact payoffs. So yeah, that's going to do it for today's gameplay. Want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.